Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Bob.
Thanks for coming out and doing this for me today. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. We wanted to do this for a while, and I've watched the series and excited to be on with you.
Thank you again. Well, we've known each other what seems like a long time.
Yeah.
Going on 25 years?
Easily.
I didn't want to say that really, but...
We started out together, really, at the Chamber of Commerce and your accounting
exactly.
business. And and you've been a great friend, but just a huge success. It's fun to watch you just grow.
Well, I've watched your career from Chamber of Commerce days through the state legislature and on into congressional work, and I'm just a fan. I'm fascinated by it all, and really commend you for the years of achievement that you've been able to attain over the years. I would like to tell the 5 or 6 people that are actually watching this and living with their parents in the basement that don't know you.
So we've doubled
viewership? We've doubled viewership. A little bit about you that I pulled out of your biography. You're the lead Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee, but formerly the chairman of House Ways and Means. Considered by many, and for sure by me, to be probably the most powerful committee in Congress because it touches so many lives. You take on taxes and health care and Social Security, Medicare, international trade and welfare. That's everybody, right?
Yeah, no, it really is. You can, and that's why I love the committee. You can literally change everyone's life for the better, from this committee. And it's not other than national security, perhaps education. Yeah, this has just the greatest things to work on.
Absolutely. Well, as chairman of House Ways and Means, you authored and helped pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which reformed the tax code for the first time in 30 some odd years, leading to millions of, is it billions or millions of jobs?
So we're at 6 million and counting at this point. Good number.
Unbelievable. Record revenue for the U.S. Treasury, lowest unemployment rate in almost 50 years, and something that I think is not talked about enough that should be a part of the conversation is highest wage growth in a decade or so.
Yeah, and what's the best part about wages? All the experts told us this can't happen. One of the reasons we took it on was all the experts said, look, there's a new normal in America. Growth will never be much above 2%. Paychecks will be flat. You can't do anything about jobs moving overseas. Remember, because every month a new company relocated, and forget about American manufacturing. We knew with the more competitive tax code and then just more balanced regulation, we knew we could change all that. So what's really neat is not only are wages growing, but they're growing fastest for blue collar and low income workers. So the chances of you having bigger paychecks than your supervisor right now is really good, and so I love that part of the result.
Yeah, that and tremendous legislation and a highlight for sure. Before that, you were on the influential health subcommittee for House Ways and Means, former chairman and vice chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, and even prior to that, your election to Congress, you served as Chamber of Commerce executive, which I mentioned before. 18 years in Beaumont and the Woodlands, is that right?
Yeah, in Rapid City, South Dakota, where I grew up originally. So it's, I love Chamber of Commerce work. That's how we met with entrepreneurs like you, starting their businesses, surviving tough times, thriving in good times. And I loved working with the business leaders to build a community. And it turned out it was great training for the Ways and Means chairmanship and the work there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a whole nother page of achievements and accomplishments. I'll simply say to those that might be watching here, go to your website, look at your biography if you really want to see all of the things that Kevin's been able to achieve. It's really remarkable. Now, if this actually goes too long, we're cutting all of that.
all the good stuff is gone. Got it.
But the one thing that's going to stay, the most important part of this whole thing, is that you are the husband to the remarkable, incredible, vivacious, beautiful Kathy Brady, and you have 2 great sons, Will and Sean.
We do. I'm blessed. Kathy. And,
We
both did very well with our wives and families, and it's fun. So we continue to live here, in the Woodlands, commute to work each week, and it's really, it's a tough life to do that. boy, we wanted to raise our boys here
Yeah.
in Texas, and it was exactly the best decision we made.
Fun fact I actually saw that I really enjoyed reading about is you logged nearly 2 million miles commuting back and forth. I know that's of particular importance to you because family, your family is so important, and being a good husband and a great father to both the boys is so important.
It is, and it is. The hardest part of the job is being away, and getting on the plane Monday morning or Tuesday
Right.
morning, and all that. But it comes with the job, and again, for us, raising our boys here in Texas, being involved in the community, and as you know, we worry if you move to Washington, you're going to get disconnected
Right.
with the people you work for,
Yep.
you know, and represent. And so we've talked about this often. Just staying out of that bubble up there
Yeah.
makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, I commend you for that. It's you've done a lot, you've achieved a lot, but I think one of your greatest accomplishments is just having a family that just loves each other and really tight. I'm curious to know, our first question today, I'm curious to know, is there an early age where you can remember when you first thought about being interested in politics?
Yes, so the answer is no. It was, our family, though, we're always
That's what
influenced by our
yeah,
family.
yeah,
So
yeah.
our family was really involved in the community. My dad was a party chairman.
Right.
My uncle was a state senator. We pass out things, for like city council candidates, but it was not a focus on politics really in our family. I think when Dad was killed, Mom, who had to raise 5 of us by herself, she really, got us involved, and she just taught us to give back. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, she had all the Brady girls and boys involved so deeply. I think at the end of the day, that's what influenced me.
And a great influence it must have been. I'm sure around the holidays, everybody gets together and talks about the synergistic politics that you all have. So,
We kind of keep that low,
Right,
Bob.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
so we talked a little bit about this. You spent a number of years with the different business communities and chambers of commerce. How did that sort of coalescing the different businesses and owners, how did all of that really help you sort of as you moved into politics and the career there?
Yeah, well, there are a couple things very valuable. One is watching how hard it is to succeed in business as a small business entrepreneur. Just what a challenge that is. I learned so much there. Secondly, you have to build consensus through your board and the community with people with a lot of different opinions.
Right.
The Chamber of Commerce allowed me to interact with some of the best leaders in every community, which teaches you how to lead as well. I learned a lot there. And the final thing is, I was fortunate in chamber work to be in 3 completely different economies. In South Dakota, it was agriculture, tourism, and a military economy.
Okay.
In Beaumont, it was petrochemicals, refineries, heavy union-dominated
Yep.
community and economy. And then here in the Woodlands area, fast growth, healthcare, energy, trade, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that turns out, looking back, that helped me a lot in tax reform because I knew Main Street looks different.
Yes.
In a lot of communities. And so the tax code, as you're rewriting it and redesigning it, you had to think about how does this work in this economy versus another, and it turned out to be really helpful.
And it was really all about, sort of going back to that and feeding off of what you just said, it was really all about making the U.S. more competitive in terms of the tax code and with the rest of the world and just being fair to the business communities.
Yeah, we had fallen so far behind our competitors because we'd waited 30 years.
Right.
And they just had sped by us, and we dropped to, out of the 35 most competitive countries, we dropped to 31st in competitive, and we were still falling.
Right.
And so the whole goal was, could we design a tax code built for growth of jobs and paychecks in the economy?
Right.
But secondly, could we redesign it so our businesses could compete and win anywhere in the world,
Yep.
including here at home? And while there's lots of things you and I might do differently, we got the fundamentals right for the country.
Right.
And what we had hoped, that growth and jobs investment coming back, that we succeeded there.
Yeah, because we're in 10 years plus now of the longest expansion in U.S. history, and each sort of milestone that we get to requires another level of attention and detail to keep that sort of engine running.
It does.
So here's what I really want to know. What's a typical day at the office look like for you?
You know, there's so few typical days. You know,
Right,
it's different
right.
back here in Texas.
Right.
Like what we're doing now during our August work period, which is awesome because you start in your bed in the morning and you
Right.
come back at night.
Yeah.
And it's just being in the community. Right now, we're focused on urging the passage of the New Mexico-Canada agreement and also educating the community about the real dangers of Medicare for all. So in the district, there's a lot of listening. In Washington, the days are long and they're full of congressional hearings, listening constituents, governing.
Yep.
But there's no question the craziest period was the period of tax reform.
Oh, boy.
Because Paul Ryan and I were desk mates. So we spent 16 years talking about trying to get ready for the hope that someone would open the window
Right.
and we could dive through it. And then we had a 10-week period from introduction to getting it to the president's desk. And Bob,
That's crazy.
it was unbelievable. The last 10 days, I led the conference committee, so we had to reconcile two different tax codes, get 100% of the Senate Republicans, 95% of the House Republicans, and the president. We didn't sleep much those 10 days, but looking back, and even during it, we knew it was historical,
Right.
and that just gets the adrenaline pumping.
Yeah. We could spend probably 2 or 3 hours talking just about that process. It's fascinating to me, but really the couple of things that we wanted to talk about today, you've already sort of alluded to, our trade agreements situation and healthcare. And so as we sort of move into that direction, I'm curious to know, what have economists told you so far about the long-term effects of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement?
Yeah, well, they're significant because this is already, NAFTA is already the largest and most integrated free trade agreement on the planet, but it was old. It is old.
Right.
And so modernizing it, as the president did, opening up some new markets. But I'll tell you too, there are some gold standard provisions on intellectual property,
Right.
on e-commerce and all that, on services that frankly will be the standard for trade agreements around the world. I think that's important. But secondly, Mexico and Canada, as you know, you can't just buy American, you have to sell American.
Right.
All throughout the world.
Yeah.
Mexico and Canada are our two biggest customers. In fact, they're bigger than the next 10 combined.
Oh, wow.
And the ability to grow your big customers
Right.
is always economically. So adding 176,000 new jobs,
Right.
growing the economy, GDP grows as well. But I think more importantly, this integrated North America is good for families who have more choices and prices, good for business.
Right.
And together, when we combine the three of us, our businesses compete better against China,
Right.
Europe, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
the rest
yeah.
of the world. So America's made for trade, Texas even more. So for our state, already the #1 exporter in the nation, this is crucially important.
Well, I've heard here and read recently that by two different groups that at the full implementation of the USMCA agreement, it will be at about 76,000 new auto industry jobs and 176,000 new jobs across the board. Does that sound about right?
It does, and I think they're probably undershooting a bit here. I think, one, we already have a successful trade agreement.
Right.
This grows off. I think the greatest benefits is not actually quantity, it's quality.
Right.
You know, this really fits, you know, the 21st century economy, and the other one doesn't, just because it's been a while. The other thing too, I think it's a confidence builder on trade, period.
Right.
Globally, I think it's important for the rest of the world to see us, you know, put in place a new modern trade agreement as the president is really challenging countries like China
Right.
to move toward fair trade
Right.
in a smarter way.
So as we enter into these trade agreements, and they're really extraordinarily crucial because they set the framework around which we're going to try to trade fairly between the two or three or however many countries are involved in any given trade agreement. When you look at that and the effect on the economy in each of those respective countries, is there another aspect of this that makes it really important to our global competitiveness as a country to get this done?
Yeah, when we combine really supply chains of our two closest neighbors, the energy, which we export and import with our two closest neighbors, when you put that together, turns out it makes American businesses far more competitive around the world. And the truth of the matter is the new agreement actually is more fair to the U.S., certainly in the auto industry, more content being made here as well. It's really locks in the energy reforms, the telecommunications reforms, removes barriers we've had in Canada. So just overall, on balance, it's a significant improvement.
So an indication of how important this is to both of our partners in that regard is Mexico ratified their step in the agreement June 19th, as I understand. Canada, by all indications, is really waiting on us and waiting on Congress to take the next step. So how important is it to try and get this done now versus letting it drift off from a timing standpoint?
In a word, it's crucial that we finish it this year. You know, Mexico not only ratified it, they've already changed their laws to begin a transformation of their labor and union laws in Mexico. It's really remarkable how committed they are to it. Canada has their position. They're just ready, waiting for the green light from us. And I think kicking it into next year is a huge mistake economically and politically. Every day we delay is good news for China. It's good news for our competitors. And then every day we delay, we postpone some of the jobs and growth benefits from the agreement. So I think it's crucial we get it done this fall.
So this may be a little bit of a tougher question to sort of wrap our minds around, but Foreign Policy Magazine recently quoted a study by the Trade Partnership Worldwide, a consultancy, that with no NAFTA and with no replacement for NAFTA, it could mean up to 1,800,000 jobs in the U.S. And so I know that several people have floated around the idea that the administration might actually jettison NAFTA to force Congress to take steps on this. But in light of the negative impact that it could have long term, how serious are both parties likely to take that as a leverage point to get this done?
I think pretty seriously. The president's been pretty clear about it. This is a significant upgrade from the existing NAFTA. If Congress plays politics or stalls out or just doesn't take it up, he's made it clear he'll withdraw from the current agreement. He just doesn't think it's fair. And so I think that makes it even more incumbent on us, because I think if NAFTA goes away, it is going to be a huge disruptor in our economy, jobs, growth, just all of that. And on the other hand, I think modernizing it, as well as continuing to develop more workers in the U.S., I think those two things, more customers and more workers, are really the key economic issues for America. So as much as we like the growth now, I think there's far more to be had if we can continue trade and we can develop the workforce.
Well, you touched on a related subject a minute ago, and that's China. And I'd like to sort of allude to some words that really economists cringe whenever they hear them uttered. They cringe when they hear regulation. They cringe when they hear zoning. They cringe when they hear tariffs. We've introduced that lexicon back into our discourse on how to gain leverage and to get things done with our trading partners. So with China, who's going to win that tariff fight, if you will?
The answer is it is in both of our interests to solve that issue. I've had a lot of discussions with the president. I'm not a tariff fan. They're taxes. And they have the same impact on the economy and investment and growth. He believes that they are a leverage point. And he's used it with the Mexico-Canada agreement, certainly with Europe, which they're starting a framework there for a new trading relationship. When China, he's the first president to take China head on. They've been cheating for a long time. It's cost us tens of thousands of jobs. And the truth is, you can't continue that relationship. It is a tough love type of approach, and there's no question tariffs have an impact on the economy. So our hope is, and they were within inches of a new agreement. I'm convinced that there is a rare moment in time where the president can actually deliver a dramatically different, fair trading relationship with China.
Right.
I think the rest of the world is cheering us on
Right.
quietly because they don't have the size and strength to sort of force China to the table on this. I think we're all hopeful sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And again, China's got to decide, you know, if they want to be that world leader, you know, economically, you know, they're going to have to change their trading relationships, and this is one of them.
Well, on the one hand, tariffs really haven't gone well for us in the past. When we look back in history, Smoot-Hawley, back in the Great Depression era, really was blamed for us driving us a little further into the Depression. Move forward to the 80s, and we've got Japan, and working with Japan and imposing tariffs. We were successful in that fight, but a lot of economists sort of blame that for pushing us into a recession. And all of those, because of what you just mentioned, the more tariffs you put on an economy, the more of a brake you put on its growth. But it seems like this president has an uncanny ability to reverse that dialogue and really make tariffs work. I mean, he's been successful, it seems like, to the average guy, me, in either threatening or imposing and then getting what he wants.
I think one of the key differences, if tariffs are just protectionist, you're building a trade wall so no one can come in there, that's where I think you do real damage to the economy long term. In this case, I think he's trying to tear down a barrier with China that has allowed them to just with impunity, you know, violate. Look, they do steal our technology. They do trade unfairly. It is, and everyone knows it. And so I think his goal is to use this temporarily to force that discussion to the table. He has. The question is, can they, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be President Xi and President Trump who ultimately reach that agreement. And my discussions with him is he does want an agreement, but he wants it to be, he'll walk away from one that isn't significant.
Well, on the one hand, $400 billion trade deficit is what we're trying to fix. One of the things we're trying to fix, as you mentioned, intellectual property rights is another, but it actually works in our favor in this scenario because that's a much bigger part of China's economy than they are of ours. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I am too. Again, I think the tariffs there's no doubt have an impact on our growth. Longer term, it'll be workers to do it. So I think there's an opportunity here where we actually expand free trade, but on a more level playing field.
Yeah. Well, let's take a breather from all of that heavy talk, and I want to ask you a personal question. I recall that you like to read, and specifically historical biographies. Am I right about that?
I do that along with trash mysteries
as
well. So I don't want to come off too highbrow here, but yeah, I do love that.
I was just curious, is there a historical figure that you've read about that really kind of stands out to you as being really fascinating?
You know, George Washington, how do you set up a country in that type of leadership? Abraham Lincoln, who never had a day of peace, but had the biggest challenge of any president in our history. And then we talked about this, you know, I'd always wanted to meet President Reagan, you know, because he too believed there was a brighter future for America. He just ignored all the experts and pundits and rebuilt the military, redesigned the tax code. I mean, just restored, you know, our growth. And so, it's just exciting to read about those leaders.
So you never got to meet President Reagan?
I didn't. In fact, I sent a letter to him in California asking if I could come out and just shake his hand because I wanted to do that. I got the most gracious note back from his foundation. But I will tell you, to honor him, we went to the Reagan Ranch on the 30th anniversary of him signing the tax reform bill. At the table he signed it on, as we launched, our effort. And our point was President Reagan wouldn't recognize the tax code that we had that day.
Right.
From what he had fought so hard to do. And so, yeah, we've tried to honor him as we launched our own tax efforts.
Well, as a fanboy over your career, the one thing that I can say that I got to do that you didn't was to meet President Reagan. I got to shake his hand one time in
Did
the
you?
Roosevelt room 100 years ago.
Wow. It's a big moment.
Yeah.
Big moment.
Well, let's pivot to a topic that's getting a lot of attention these days, and that is universal health care, sort of flying under the banner of Medicare for all. And what I want to do is throw out a couple of statistics and put everybody to sleep for a few minutes, and then sort of come back in with a couple of comments about those that argue for and those that argue against, and then get your thoughts about it. Couple of stats. Canada's GDP spend on healthcare, approximately 11.3% of their GDP, about $253-ish billion. 30% of that is private. The UK has a GDP spend of about 9.7%, a lot lower than even Canada, 21% private. When we contrast that with the US GDP spend, we're anywhere from 17 to 18%, depending on who you talk to, and 45% of that is private. And then when we look from that filter, through that lens at some of the arguments, we get really a couple that you generally hear for, which is it's a lower cost, it should be a lower cost to Americans, most Americans, and two, that it will cover all Americans. Interesting. Against, we hear some very common themes. One is a real reluctance to turn over an additional 18% of our economy to government management. I think you do a great job, but really giving government more of our economy sounds a little challenging to me. Secondly, it could lead to the collapse of the private system for most Americans. Third, it could create a two-tiered healthcare system between the wealthy and everyone else. And actually, Canada's going through that right now. And ironically, one of the solutions they're talking about is diving more into the private healthcare. And then lastly, loss of individual choice. So when we look at all of those filters and all those lenses and discussions, tell me, sort of give us some ideas, some thoughts that you have about this Medicare for All proposal.
Yeah, so I think it is a dangerous proposal, short and long term. There's no question. As amazing as our healthcare treatments and life-saving drugs and all that, our health system does have challenges. But look, we ought to keep what's working, fix what's broken, but to throw it all out and start over with a plan that gives unlimited control over your healthcare decisions to Washington bureaucrats and politicians. Right. A one-size-fits-all approach that will do great damage to our healthcare system locally is the wrong answer. And my worry is that at the end of the day, Americans will pay more and wait longer for worse healthcare than they have today. In our congressional district, because Medicare for All bans companies from providing health care work, 600,000 families in my congressional district will have their health care plans canceled. In Texas, this is a big number, 21 million Texans who get good health care at work. That will go away. So will the Children's Health Insurance Program. So will TRICARE for the military, something you've long championed military and the strength there. And even Medicare Advantage, which offers more options for seniors, goes away under this system. And so I think cutting reimbursements to our local hospitals and doctors are going to create a worse doctor shortage. I think we're going to have overcrowded facilities. We know from Canada and England how their system works. In Canada, if you see a doctor who refers you to a specialist, on average you'll wait 4 months to see that doctor. Well, that's unacceptable in America. And even if you get a lump in your breast as a woman and they say you need to go get a CT scan, we need to figure out is this cancerous or not, you'll wait a month in Canada. That's cruel. In my view, and we're not going to settle for that. And so Medicare for All, by taking those healthcare decisions out of our hands and giving it to Washington, I don't know about you, but the government can barely keep its doors open.
Right.
Do you really want to trust them with your life and death healthcare decisions? And the answer is no, but this is real. Medicare for All has, in the House, that bill has 177 sponsors, all Democrats, endorsed by half of the presidential candidates, and certainly gaining momentum in the Ways and Means Committee, where healthcare, half of all healthcare starts. And so I think one of the keys is people need to understand and educate themselves. I know during August, visiting with their doctors and our hospitals, other providers, they think it'll be devastating for their healthcare here at home.
Wow. Well, I've heard varying reports from out of the UK on their system, and the things that I read most about are the difficulties and challenges they are having in getting a diagnosis or prognosis to take them to a doctor, to get them out to that scenario. But then when you look at sort of how much that cost is on Americans compared to their particular GDP, as an example, and their household incomes, and when you look at the fact that we're really not extending our lifespan dramatically with the higher cost of healthcare, there still needs to be a solution. So are there currently in any conversations anywhere about alternatives?
Yeah, there are, and I think it is, unlike the past, the solution doesn't lie in a 2,000-page healthcare bill. It really is targeted solutions. We ought to first protect the healthcare people, the good healthcare people do have. Protect that right to have that, really crucial. Secondly, I think we can crack down on overpriced drugs. Not necessarily all high-priced drugs, because sometimes that's the cure. We've all been waiting for, but crack down overpriced drugs, giving seniors more power to choose the health care that they need and the medicines they need. I think we need to end surprise billings, frankly, which really continues to grow in size. I think we need to give people more options than the Affordable Care Act. We know President Trump has helped expand this. When we allow small businesses to join together in association plans, they can cut their costs by 30%, have more control over their local healthcare decisions, and prosper. There are a lot of awfully good alternatives. At the end of the day, for America, it's not the amount of money we spend on healthcare, it's how we spend it. And I think one of the keys is government is too big and involved in that decision making. And we have to give consumers more knowledge. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
I think the free market system really does work, including in healthcare, if you've got choices in information.
Well, I've got a couple of other questions that are sort of diving in a little bit personally to you that I'm curious about. Mark Twain said that the two most important dates for a human being is the day they're born and the day they understand why. And I've seen your career, I've seen the humility you bring to your office and how you deal with all of the people you talk to in such a caring way. And so I know from just observing from afar how, to me, this was really kind of a defining moment, your entry into Congress, your ability to work in Congress. That was really, for me at least, I'm curious to know about you, sort of when you understood why you were born, right? But like politicians or like athletes, politicians usually, this is a very short shelf life. And so I'm really curious to know when you think you'll know when it's time to turn the next page in this chapter of your life.
So I had never planned to spend my life in Congress, and I still don't. And as on the Ways and Means Committee, I'm multiply term limited in that. I think that's a good thing, frankly, in Congress in these leadership roles. Right now, I'm completely focused on regaining the majority in the House. I'd like to chair the Ways and Means Committee. We have more to do on tax, on trade, and we got to tackle and save the important programs like Social Security and Medicare. So right now, that's my focus. I love what I do. I do have some adventures after Congress, and I think those are going to be great too.
Well, there's no Hall of Fame for a politician except maybe the history books. For you, is there an equivalent to a Lifetime Achievement Award?
No, I think tax reform was pretty rewarding because we'd spent so much time preparing for that
Right.
moment
Right.
In history. Two other areas I'm really proud of privately. My first job as Ways and Means Chairman wasn't to redesign the tax code. It was to negotiate an end to the ban on exporting American crude oil around the country.
Right.
So the task Paul Ryan
Yep.
gave me 3 weeks into the chairmanship, and just watching, and we negotiated trade on solar and wind for lifting that ban, watching that transform America's energy,
Yeah.
in our role around the world is really fun to watch. And then when we worked together, and I was in the state legislature, we created the birth defects registry for Texas to make it easier to figure out why birth defects were occurring in our state, to try to figure out the causes and prevent them, only because a young woman and her husband brought no cards into our office, and together we changed that in Texas. That was 25 years ago. Babies are being born healthy in Texas now because that young couple,
Yeah.
walked into our office.
Yeah.
So there's some things that don't get much notice that I really, I feel like we've made a good difference. So.
Well, this is, I'm glad we were able to have some time to get to this question, because for me personally, I've thought about this quite a bit just as I sort of look out and observe our society and culture. So the question is this: as you measure the projected path of this country, however you measure the path, and by a pessimistic account, it's a dark time. It's the dialogue is a difficult dialogue. It's a contentious dialogue. There's a lot of really, a lot, I guess, for lack of a better word, a lot of darkness out there as we look at our society. And so I'm curious to know, in order for us to be a more selfless society, a culture, a culture that's more caring and helping those that are disadvantaged and the outcast, that we should be doing and aspiring to as a society and as a culture, in your heart, is there a dialogue that you feel like we as a country, as a society, we should be having right now?
So my belief is that these aren't dark times. I think that is what the national media highlights the most.
Right.
They're fight promoters at heart.
Right.
They ignore, and if there isn't a fight, they'll find one
Right.
and create one. And the truth of the matter is, 90% of the bills we pass in Congress are bipartisan. We work together on. They ignore many of the good things that are done there. And back home here, tell you, we're not only are we not a dark nation, we are incredibly optimistic. And I just came from a healthcare ministry in Magnolia, where the community's coming together. They're not taking any federal money, just providing help to working families of all colors, all races, all income.
Right.
It is just, that's happening all across our district, all across America. And at the end of the day, I don't think the media quite understands we are an optimistic nation.
Yeah.
We are a nation of builders, not wreckers.
Right.
I mean, it's in our DNA
Yeah.
to do this. And so I think they're underestimating the strength of the American people. We are not what they peddle each night, in my view. At least, no. In fact, nowhere near. So my forecast for the future is dramatically brighter than what you see on TV or on social media.
That's amazing. Well, Kevin, this has gone by like that. And it's just been fascinating for me to be able to spend time with you again like this and just have conversation and talk about the things that are important both to you and to the country, and things that I'm interested in. Maybe nobody else is interested in, but definitely I am. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to come out and do this.
My pleasure. We've been old and dear friends many years. It's just fun. you're the American dream. You know what I mean? Work hard,
Yeah.
take risk, challenge yourself, and it's just fun. I'm proud of everything you've become. What's neat is we're in a country where hard work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And risk
Yeah.
still gives your family opportunities, you probably never dreamed of when you were growing up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you for having me.